That's right, there is a Metroid Prime 2D in the works. The future is incredible, huh? It's my understanding that this has been worked on for quite some time now, but this is the first time that a public demo has been released. The demo itself is quite short, but we do get to see how some basic mechanics work out, how the narrative might function, and overall it's just a nice glimpse of insight on how the game is being designed. So let's take a look at the mechanics. We do have a wall jump, which I always love to see. The demo's wall jump is set up such that you cannot consecutively use the same wall as you wall jump, because your momentum is too great to return to the original wall. Here I am holding back or left as soon as I wall jump to try and make it back. As you can see, you simply can't. I'm sure this will be the case in the final build. This means we can't quickly scale walls like we could in Super Metroid. That's okay as long as there is still an advantage to the player for using the wall jump. Otherwise, what would be the point? Indeed, there are places in the demo that you can only access if you wall jump. Nothing significant is really there now, but it is a nice, reassuring nod to the players from the developers that the wall jump may grant them the ability to sequence break or access upgrades or areas faster, or at least that the wall jump is going to have some kind of utility. I'm going to have to be upfront here and say this is not the kind of aiming I like. Truthfully, I find no pleasure in having a mouse aim on a 2D plane like this. It feels unnatural to me. In my day, we could only aim in 8 directions, and we liked it. It's going to sound absurd, but I think within the context of a 2D game, there is more control for the player when you limit their ability to aim. Crucially though, you must design with that limitation in mind, and I don't want to really get into that discussion here because it's not really the place. I just want to say that for me, this is not my preference, and that is 100% fine. I grew up with Super Metroid, and a younger generation grew up with Metroid Prime. If someone or a group of people want to come along and attempt to merge those two things, even if it's more specifically just making Prime 2D, I think that's wonderful. There are several reasons why I do not like this aiming style, but I'm just going to go over 3. One is carpal tunnel syndrome and RSI, which is repetitive strain injury. I don't have carpal tunnel yet, and I would like to keep it that way. I'm just not really a fan of spamming mouse clicks in any game. Even when I'm playing something like Brood War or Diablo, I've become conscious of clicking my mouse as I've gotten older. And this type of aiming really wants you to spam clicks. So, you might say, you can say what you want about that, but I'm just not a fan. Second reason is this type of aiming all but guarantees there's not going to be any interesting, fun, varied, or satisfying movement. Do you really think you'll see movement like this when you're anchored to a mouse and aiming reticle? I would love to be proved wrong here. I just have my doubts. That's another thing, really. Metroid Prime isn't a game that has a lot of cool options to begin with, so I think it's natural that its 2D iteration wouldn't need to worry about that all too much. And I'm not sure if hardcore Metroid Prime fans are even interested in movement options. And again, this is a demo of the first 7 minutes of the game, so I'm just making an inference from what we have available. It could be that there is going to be incredible movement options, the likes of which have never been seen before. So just take what I'm saying with a grain or 3 of salt. My final reason is really closer to a gut feeling, and it's honestly probably just my own personal bias. But I've always felt that this style of aim gives developers an out to not tightly balance fights. It's always seemed to me that developers that use this kind of aiming aren't so much requiring accuracy of the player, but rather volume of shots, which I feel like is antithetical to using a mouse in the first place. It also reminds me of early, terrible Flash games, and I'm not saying this is that. I'm just trying to explain that this is a personal hang-up, and that while I might have trouble looking past it, there are plenty of others that love this type of gameplay and aiming. Another thing, and this might be a bug, and it might not, I'm sure it will probably fix later on, is that because of how Samus fixes her vision on where the aiming reticule is, you can have weird moments where she's looking one way while you're running another. It's a small thing, but it can be pretty jarring and goofy. I mean, I understand why this has this free mouse style aim. Metroid Prime has this first-person shooter element to it, and if we're going to graft Prime into a 2D space, shouldn't we have that element still present somehow and not just make this in Doom? I mean, I don't know. Obviously, if I was making this, I would ditch this method of aiming altogether. Here's the thing though, I'm not making this. I want the developers to make whatever game is in their heart because there are people that want to play that game. Ultimately, this video is an effort to examine mechanics and game design and discuss them in an attempt to extract value for people that like to think about this stuff. I'm digressing a bit here, so let us return to topic. I suspect an additional major reason for this aiming is the scanning system. It would be maybe weird if you couldn't freely aim to scan things across the room. I don't want to lay out a case for how you could remove the free mouse style aim and have something fixed like in Super Metroid and still have the ability to scan across the room, but I can't resist. Just have Super Metroid's aiming system, but just have an option to toggle the scan, like you already have. You could either tab between areas of interest, or you could let the player use their controller's D-pad or analog sticks to find points of interest. I think a big problem with this, other than the fact that I think it would be wildly unpopular to the point of laughter, except with me, is that in a boss fight or even just in general, aiming for a point of interest with a D-pad or even analog could be unwieldy. Speaking of scanning, I found myself accidentally tabbing out of lore entries because I was not holding down the scan button, which is right mouse click. I think it would be great if the final version has the ability to not only switch scanning from right click to left, but also having a toggle that leaves your scan up so you can read it without holding down a mouse click. Instead, when you mouse click, it dismisses the window. It would be a small quality of life thing that would be incredible. Sort of related, please let me just press up to save instead of scanning. Pressing up to save just feels way more natural, especially in a 2D space. Also, it's weird to even mention this because this is a demo, and it's probably closer to a proof of concept than anything else, but you should mention how and that you can scan earlier instead of right at the elevator. If you let a player know they could have been doing something this entire time, much later it can cause frustration. I think this is especially true if it involves collecting items or checking things off a list, like scanning to fill a bestiary or lore log. In Metroid Prime, I feel like I need to be scanning everything as soon as I start the game so I don't miss anything, which is exhausting. What would be even more exhausting, however, is if I found out much later I could be scanning, because now I'm going to feel like I need to go to the start of the game and scan my way through everything I've already played just to be sure I've got everything. Just to be clear, I don't think the final version of this is in any danger of that, but I do think it's a good lesson in general for people and aspiring developers to think about. Honestly, I think the scan was brought up at the elevator so players would not have the luxury of forgetting about scanning. Which is a bit weird because only Metroid fans are going to know about this demo anyway, so it's not like you need to teach a new audience about scanning. I haven't played Metroid Prime in probably a decade, and as soon as I saw this orange holographic whatever it is, I was trying to figure out how to scan. But alas, it eluded me. This is probably where I would have mentioned that you can scan, but I'm sure that the final version is going to have the usual Ridley preamble, and maybe it will be mentioned there. One final note regarding scanning is that I wouldn't just tell the player they can scan, and surely I would never tell Samus as she enters a room that it needs scanning. This is an instance where maybe you should show the player and not tell them. Samus is a capable bounty hunter after all, so how might you show and not tell here? Well, Samus could scan something herself, of course, but then a new problem rises in how do we convey the button inputs to the player so they know how to scan for themselves? Is Q an intuitive button to have for scanning? I'm not so sure that it is, but I don't know what the alternative would be. Maybe having 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to go through different visors, or maybe as she is scanning something for the first time, the scanner visor icon populates so that we know we have it, and maybe it also shows a hotkey for it. But if you go the route of having an in-game cutscene of Samus scanning something, please make sure it is skippable. And if you want to be extra safe that someone doesn't skip how to scan, you could make the prompt for skipping the scan button plus a skip button or something. Which I would like to take a moment and acknowledge that you can skip the opening cutscene to this demo. I know it's just a demo, but seriously, thanks. Anyway, it's all about presentation really, and I know that a lot of people are numb to being told what to do and how to play. Further, I would argue a lot of players don't even care to be told what to do. At this point, it just seems expected. But if you give someone the agency of their own mind to just think, the experience will be better for it. It is rather grating to enter into a room and think, ah yes, this must be a room that I need to use this item or scan, and then the game immediately tells you, scan the environment. Also, who is recommending foot travel? Is that even necessary? I think it can be assumed that if Samus is landing, she has already done the best possible reconnaissance by gunship that she can. Or alternatively, if you feel absolutely compelled to throw some kind of line to the player, you could have, after showing Samus's gunship flying around the surface, a zoom into her face and a simple gruff, "Guess I'll have to land and continue this on foot." Or, possibly even better, you could just show her displeasure and annoyance as she engages landing. The rest can be inferred. Remember, put faith in your players, even if they don't deserve it. Okay, well, that's my thoughts on the demo. Best of luck. Oh yeah, there's also a bug when entering the elevator. Samus normally has her hand on her hip, which is great by the way, but if you hold up and left and I think scan, she'll just freeze like this. I'm not sure, I couldn't recreate it. Alright, bye.